Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni Viewer and I'm back with another one of my infamous unscripted videos for a movie I just saw. This one, Ghost in the Shell. Yep, figured I had to see it considering it looked like it might be the first anime-inspired American film which might actually be good, if you catch my meaning. Some people will say that Edge of Tomorrow would be the first one, but technically that's based on a book, All You Need Is Kill. Japanese book, yeah, kind of has that anime manga influence, but it's a book all the same. Ghost in the Shell, completely manga slash anime influenced, and for all intents and purposes, this movie did look like it could be the first really good one. In spite of the controversy, which, you know what? I'm not even going to discuss the controversy regarding casting Scarlett Johansson or other non-Asian actors in this movie because that's just not, I'm just not going to do it. I mean, I'm going to judge this movie based on what it is. Let me put it this way. Considering that the only people who have gotten mad about it are people who are not in Japan, where this started and where for all intents and purposes it should be considered a big deal, I don't see why I should get upset about it either. But anyway, that's the last I'll say on it. And you should also know my thoughts on the original movie, because really, that's the thing that everyone else will have seen if they're familiar with Ghost in the Shell at all prior to this, and what everyone will no doubt be comparing it to. I've only seen the original movie, haven't seen the sequel, Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence, didn't watch Standalone Complex, at least not yet, and I don't know if I ever will, because, you know, I've heard they don't measure up to the original movie, and I haven't read the source material manga. The original movie is my only familiarity. And I like the original movie. I don't necessarily love it the way some anime fans do, but I like it. I certainly respect its place in the history of anime, because it came out in that same period where there were a bunch of series which basically revolutionized the medium. Which, come to think of it, that was the year 1995. We should do a video on that at one point, but that's a topic for another day. So yeah, I like the original movie. Since I'm not a rabid fan of it, I think that can help me give a proper assessment of the live action film. Because even though I will be comparing the two occasionally, since, you know, that's appropriate there. Unlike with Kong Skull Island and Godzilla being different genres, this is a very specific remake, so it automatically invites comparison. But at the same time, I'm not such a rabid purist fan, if you will, that I would look at any changes from this new movie and say, no, you cannot change perfection. No, I'm gonna say, if the movie has made changes, are they good or are they bad? So, enough dawdling. Where do I stand? So, quick version is, does it surpass the original movie? No. Does it fall far short from the original movie? No. Does it do enough differently to justify its existence? Just barely manages, I think. But is it a blatant copy? Certainly not. So, I'm sure you're trying to unweave that and figure out what it even means. Let me put it this way. Ghost in the Shell, the new movie, is different enough from the original. There are plenty of shots which, as someone who actually saw the original right before seeing the remake, I could look at and say, oh yeah, that's straight from the original movie. Different context, but clearly that is from the original movie, clearly meant to be recognized. But there's a lot more that's built around it. The scenes that are copied aren't necessarily copied exactly. They're close. Like, hardly a spoiler, I guess. The opening, both movies open the same way when we see the Major, her name is different in both movies, so I'll just be calling her the Major, if that's okay with you guys. Basically, being made. That's how the movies open, with the opening credits. The process of watching the Major go through the process of cyborg birth for all intents and purposes. And the live action movie is close to resembling the original. It changes a couple things and isn't just like a blatant shot-for-shot remake, but there are those clear shots which are meant to evoke memories of the original. So I think that's a pretty good way of describing it. Close but not exact, just different enough that it feels like it's, okay, we're looking at a different interpretation. And speaking of different interpretation, there's also the matter of the philosophizing, if you will. Because Ghost in the Shell, one thing it's really well known for is its exploration of themes and its philosophy and what it means to be human and whatnot, and identity. That's a whole video unto itself, which I have yet to make because I'm not even sure I know how to do it right. But the question then becomes, like, when you're remaking something like that, how do you measure up in that regard? And I do not doubt for a moment that there will be plenty of people who say this new movie falls short of the original. I don't know. I haven't actually seen any other reviews. I wanted to go into this with a clean slate. Now, I've only seen this movie once, right before I'm filming this, and I want to avoid spoilers as well. So I don't want to get too deep into the details on this because, having only seen it once, I'm sure I missed a lot, and I haven't really had the time to process all the questions and conclusions it brings up. But the impression that I've gotten is that it's asking the same questions as the original, but it's arriving to different conclusions. And like I said, some people will see that and say, automatically makes it inferior. I disagree. I think it is perfectly possible to interpret philosophies differently. I mean, that's how philosophy works, people. What I get from Socrates or the Bible or what have you is going to be very different from what you get, most likely. But like I said, I don't necessarily know if I've had enough time to process what it does in that regard. Plus, I'd need to see it again. Maybe when it comes out on DVD, I'll go a bit more in depth into this. Biggest difference I can say between the two different versions is that the movie puts more time and effort into its plot. Because, let's be honest here, if there's one weak point with the original movie, it is the plot. Don't get mad at me. I mean, that's, again, a pretty common thing in philosophy. The actual logic and story structure when you're using stories to tell philosophies, they tend not to be very good and not hold up to scrutiny. But the original movie falls into that category. What we get, for the most part, is cliche to a degree, which, you know, cliche is all in how you use it, whether or not it's good or bad. And it's also very like, this is how it goes, this is just the daily lives of these characters for all intents and purposes, working for a Secret Service organization for all intents and purposes, is their 9 to 5. And it winds up going in this direction just because that's the way it's going. With Ghost in the Shell, more emphasis is put on the plot. They clearly have something going on from the beginning. Again, not necessarily groundbreaking. There are plenty of cliches there as well. But definitely more thought was put into the plot, which I don't necessarily know if that automatically makes it better, but certainly it is easier to follow from a storytelling standpoint. Like, there actually is a plot to get invested in, unlike in the other movie where it's just, like I said, sort of going along, and what you get invested in is what the characters are talking about and what their mindset is. And the characterization, since I brought it up, also good. I mean, it's going to be hard to not get into spoilers. Okay, as far as things that didn't work, well, some of the plot details, which, again, I really don't want to spoil anything. Well, maybe this isn't so much a spoiler. Okay, this is revealed almost immediately in the movie, so I'm not going to count it as a spoiler. The Major in the new movie is the first of her kind. She is the first kind of cyborg that there is. People still have cybernetic enhancements, but they're still mostly human, more or less. They don't quite explain it, but then again, in the movie, they never quite explained it either, the original. But yeah, Major's supposed to be the first of her kind in the new movie, whereas in the old movie, what she was pretty common. Like, there was nothing necessarily special about her in the original movie. And that change alone does change a lot about where the rest of the movie goes. So I'm going to put the brakes on the plot details right there. And part of my thinking with that is they didn't really need to do it. I mean, maybe for the story they're telling, they did need to do it. Yeah, they basically did for that particular story, I guess. But, you know, it does kind of take away from something the original did right, which is the fact that there wasn't necessarily anything special about the Major. She wasn't the chosen one, if you will. I mean, not that I'm rambling too much about that. She wasn't the special one in the original movie. So it makes more sense that she would start to have these kind of doubts. Yeah, but it wasn't one of the improvements that was made, I'll give you that. And another thing that kind of stood out as unnecessary, for reasons you'll have to hear me out on before I say it, is the scene towards the middle where the Major goes to, let's be polite and call her a street girl. And they go to their room and she's like touching her face and going, "How does that feel?" And it feels like it was almost trying to be a lesbian scene, but it doesn't quite go there. Like, it either stops, I think it just plain stops before we actually get to the point of that scene, except the scene has no point because you could remove it from the film and it wouldn't change a thing. It's just sort of there and sticks out for no reason. I think it might be a reference to the manga where the Major was involved in a lesbian love scene, which, if you read the interviews with the original mangaka, it's because he just didn't want to draw a guy's butt, his exact words. But even then, including that scene in the movie feels unnecessary. Even if they had gone full bore into the lesbian side of it, it still wouldn't have added anything. I mean, sure, they could have at least tried to say, "Yes, we are the groundbreaking progressive film, for we have an openly lesbian character." Wouldn't have made a difference, because the scene is unnecessary. It would have been... You're going to hate me for saying this, I'm sure, some of you, but it would have been pandering. Trust me, when you see the scene, it will not make sense that it's there. It doesn't need to be there. Just for any reason at all. It contributes nothing. Speaking of contributing nothing, there is a minor character in there who... Well, a couple minor characters. There's one other woman character who seems like she's playing a significant supporting role in the first half of the movie, and then she just sort of vanishes, and honestly, I almost forgot she was in the movie at all. And eventually she's replaced by a guy who just sort of shows up like he's always been there. Maybe he had, and I just forgot. He had actually been in there from the beginning. That's how well that was handled. But yeah, so yeah, the movie's not perfect. But here's the thing. Even though it's not perfect, it's the first good anime-based film that America has produced. And that is significant. Again, honorable mention to Edge of Tomorrow, but it was still based on a book. We're talking about stuff based on manga and anime, and so far we've done Speed Racer and Dragon Ball Evolution and a Fist of the North Star movie that no one remembers, and yeah, there's that Netflix Death Note that's coming out, but who knows how that's going to turn out, and I'm not really a big fan of Death Note anyway. So yeah, this is actually the first good one for all intents and purposes. Certainly the first good one that wears its influence on its sleeve. And that is significant, I think, because once you crack the formula, as it were, that means others will come. And I've actually said in private conversations away from my channel for a while now that I've often thought anime and manga-based movies were going to be the next logical step from comic book-based movies. Once they figured out how to do it right, they would start making more of them. So if Ghost in the Shell really is it, and if Death Note on Netflix reinforces it, which, you know, like I said, I'm not that big a fan, but it looks like it could still be part of that upward trend, this could be the start of a brand new wave, as it were. Not that I think it will replace comic book based movies in America, but I certainly think it will be a tangential or parallel, if you will, whatever term you choose, it'll coexist. I think we'll be seeing more of these to come. If this movie is well received, I only know what I think at this point. So, I guess I'll open it to you guys then. What did you think if you saw it? Do you even want to see it? I mean, maybe you don't. Maybe you thought it looks bad from the get-go. Or maybe you're on the fence about it. I would say if you're on the fence, you can still probably go and see it and get something out of it. If you're a die-hard fan of the original movie, you're a 100% purist, it is an untouchable work of art as far as you're concerned, then of course you're probably going to hate this movie. And I suppose that can't be helped. Or maybe you're open enough to different interpretations. I know I liked it. I know I recommend it. And I recommend the original movie as well. But take that for what it's worth. So, feel free to leave your thoughts below. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer, signing off.